Well, welcome everybody to the fifth in a series of peer-to-peer webinars for the RC&D Council. And today's topic is soil health. I'm Susan McKinney, and I'm the Executive Director for Appalachian RC&D Council. We're located in Northeast Tennessee, and we're representing the National Association of RC&D Councils for this webinar series. The National Association of RC&D Councils has embraced a new model of engaging and supporting local councils. This new approach utilizes sub-awards that provide funds and leverages local investment and builds capacity across the landscape. This approach was launched in earnest in June 2019, and in the past 14 months, more than 35 sub-awards have obligated $389,000 for projects across the country. And here's a little graphic that kind of shows you where the majority of those are. This is the fifth of 8 webinars that are being held with the support of NRCS, with the goal of expanding these activities by highlighting success stories and creating connections. We have a quick survey. It's only 3 questions. If you would complete this while we do a brief introduction of today's presenters. And joining me today is Dana York, retired Associate Chief for NRCS. She's a farm owner and just an awesome person. We also have Dr. Rachel Seaman-Varner. She's a soil health specialist with USDA NRCS. Also, Rosie McVeigh is our AmeriCorps service member with RC&D and is with us in the background. She's running the technical aspects of the webinar, and we appreciate Rosie and all the work she does here. And I would also like to thank and recognize board members of the National Association of RC&D Councils that are attending today. And I'll go ahead and turn it over to Dana.
Thank you, Susan. We are excited to have Dr. Seaman-Varner, who is originally from Florida and has worked in agriculture across the country, from Florida to California, Mississippi, Virginia, and Washington State, so either side of the country. She's conducted research in agronomic and vegetable production systems, taught soils, agroecology, environmental science at the college level, and worked with various producer organizations in regulation, program development, and policy at the state departments of agriculture. She holds her master's in entomology and nematology with a focus on agroecology from the University of Florida, and her PhD is in horticulture, focusing on nutrient management, soil health, and cover crops from Virginia Tech. She has just joined NRCS in January of this year as the National Soil Health Specialist, and because the pandemic hadn't even been to Washington yet. So we welcome Rachel, and we'll let you share your screen and start your presentation.
Great, thank you so much. We got screen 2, and then here we go. How does that look? Can you see the presentation? Great. Okay. Well, thank you, Dana, for the introduction. It's my pleasure to be here. I'm very excited to be talking with you today about NRCS's involvement with soil health and how we're working together with partners to build high-functioning and resilient soils. So just briefly, I'll be looking into a little bit of historical context with NRCS and also the soil health programs. We'll talk about how generally challenges lead to growth. So this is historically and also the current challenges we're facing. We'll get into some definitions and some principles of soil health based on NRCS's work, and then I'll talk specifically about current strategies and programs, technology transfer, and our training and outreach efforts. So this is a quote from Hugh Hammond Bennett, who's the father of soil conservation. He was the first chief of the agency that would become NRCS. And I find this really inspiring, and a lot of members of our division do too, talking about how boldness really advances innovations. And he pleads with us to be bold and courageous in accepting new ideas and be willing to work with the land instead of against it. And this was in a speech he gave to the American Association of Geographers back in 1943. And it's something that I think a lot of people interested in soil health really relate to, this idea of pushing new ideas and innovations and being bold. We see a lot of passion in people and their interest in soil health. And NRCS's mission has for a long time been helping people help the land. So that boldness and that passion comes into play and always has as part of this agency. It was born from the Dust Bowl. You probably know that already, and designed to support voluntary conservation efforts. We have staff all over the country, and they work one-on-one with land managers to implement conservation practices and planning, offering technical assistance and financial assistance through our programs. NRCS maintains over 150 different conservation practice standards that take those are used in the conservation planning process. They're practices that outline the criteria and the specific situations and adaptations and criteria that needs to be met to use these practices in a plan, a conservation plan. So these are like the cover cropping conservation practice standard. We use that a lot with soil health, conservation, crop rotation, reduced tillage, no tillage, prescribed grazing. Those are a lot of the standards we work with regularly. And NRCS and our group also review science and technology, and we acquire new science and innovations and use that in our programs to kind of push and advance the practice standards and also the plans. So we try to stay up on that. We review these standards on a rotating basis and integrate it to transfer technology forward. And NRCS also maintains the nationwide soil survey, which is just an incredible resource. I can get lost in it for hours, especially the web-based application now. This is built on nearly 100 years of efforts to map the soils in our country, to understand the inherent properties. We're now really integrating dynamic properties as well and using that in soil health planning. And I'll get into a little bit more detail on that. But the soil survey is a pretty incredible tool that we have. And NRCS has always been committed to soil health, whether it was early on in, post-Dust Bowl, where that challenge really pushed us forward to form Soil Conservation Service. We were focused then on conserving soil and reducing erosion, and it's kind of evolved, and some terminology and new practices and new innovations have been incorporated as we've grown over the last nearly 100 years. And the term soil health now really shows that we've integrated all this new information, and we have the skills and the tools and the methods to analyze biological indicators in soil. And so it's really shifted the focus to look at the biological functioning of soils now, because we have these new tools, and NRCS remains committed to that. Our agency now is uniquely positioned to assist producers in adopting soil health management systems, because we have that foundation of having worked with soil conservation for so long. And that focus on biology continues. We have a growing consumer demand for systems that adapt soil health management plans. So it's really a very popular, publicly popular concept, and we developed a soil health priority in 2012. The Soil Health Division was formed and instituted in 2014, and that was to meet the demand and the needs for training nationally, technology transfer, policy, and technical and strategic leadership. And we're currently increasing the technical and outreach capability of staff and partners now, and working with partners and producers to implement soil health management plans very formally. So just kind of hearkening back to the formation of what would become NRCS, the challenges that we face really do push us to improve and grow. And that was true back in the 1930s. It's true now. And the challenges that society and agriculture are facing now are somewhat different, but we are seeing that still being the impetus for some big change. So we're facing a huge population growth right now. We are more than 7.8 billion people, and the world population is projected to continue to grow. And that leads to all sorts of pressure on food security, farm economy. We are addressing issues of changing climate, water quality and quantity, and air quality. And that's linked in with the growing population and also just the urban expansion and the loss of agricultural lands. The upper image there is tracking the development, the conversion and expansion of urban areas from, I think it's up to 2017 is where this starts. So, or ends, showing how much land we're really losing. And this is all related to human health as well, and consumer demands, and really the loss of agricultural soils from degradation and also development. And our producers are facing some new challenges as well. There's new risk involving weather extremes and drought and extreme precipitation events, flooding events. We're seeing pests and disease and changes in the market and prices for commodities and input costs. We're also losing land to urbanization, and needing to address consumer needs is another pressure for producers. So we have this challenge that we're facing, and within RCS, we're focused on managing soils. And what are the things that we expect to have our soils provide? What are the key soil functions? And there are so many different ones. Back, the Millennial Ecosystem Services assessment was back in 2005, and they really set out this different classifications of ecosystem services: provisioning services, cultural services, regulatory services, and others that are really key parts of what soils do because they do so much. We have soil functions that we focus on. The provisioning is producing food, fiber, fuel, feed, and medicine. And regulatory services are capturing, filtering, and storing water, cycling and recycling nutrients, providing resilience to drought and flood and temperature extremes. Soils also function to protect plants from stress, buffer changes, and from pathogens. Soils can detoxify pollutants in certain situations, and we're starting to look at and appreciate more the sequestration of carbon and the moderation of and mitigation of the release of greenhouse gases. And always looking at the resisting erosive forces and conserving soil, keeping it in place. And soils also function to provide habitat for below ground biodiversity. So that's a lot of functions that are really important for the survival of our food production and the supporting the human population. NRCS has been a leader in soil health, and this definition of soil health is referred to by a lot of different organizations. It's concise and in my opinion, pretty elegant, but captures all of the key components. So as NRCS defines it, soil health is the continued capacity of the soil to function as a vital living ecosystem that sustains plants, animals, and humans. And there are a couple of key points here. The continued capacity, we're managing soils in a way that can be sustainable, and so that we can continue to support those soil functions that provide so many services to us. And recognizing that soil is a vital living ecosystem. There are so many organisms below ground that serve in those functions, and treating them as an ecosystem and managing in that way is the approach of soil health. And we're using those functions and supporting those functions to sustain plants, animals, and humans. There are 4 key principles of soil health. They are to minimize disturbance, and that's from tillage or from chemical disturbance. Maximizing soil cover, so that is through residue management, crop rotations, cover cropping. A third principle is to maximize biodiversity. And again, we're looking at crop rotations, cover cropping, but also now integrating above ground biodiversity with prescribed grazing and rotational grazing. And then the fourth is to maximize continuous living roots. So rather than having a long fallow period with nothing growing, soil health management plans focus on crop rotations and integrating cover crops to provide continuous living roots, which support that below ground biodiversity. And we have this statement here that kind of sums it all up, that these principles are applied to really care for the below ground livestock, that vital living ecosystem, the same way you would any above ground livestock that you can really see on a day-to-day basis. This image here shows the 4 principles and how they kind of separate from between feeding and protecting the biology below ground. On the right-hand side, we have minimizing disturbance and maximizing soil cover, and both of those really serve to protect that ecosystem. We're protecting topsoil, protecting soil aggregates, and providing and protecting the organism habitat, increasing soil organic matter, and then protecting from extreme temperature changes and moisture changes. Soil health management plans typically buffer those soils from those extremes. On the other side, in maximizing living roots and biodiversity, that really supports the feeding of the organisms below ground. It provides fuel for soil biology. It improves the diversity of below ground organisms because there's more diversity above ground and below ground. It supports resilience, increases soil organic matter, enhances nutrient cycling because there's a variety of inputs, a variety of organic materials being added to the soil. And so that supports a variety of organisms cycling nutrients. And it can also break pest cycles because there's some diversity above and below ground. If there's pest pressure, you get a balance of beneficials and no single opportunity for a massive infestation. And all these principles are really, they're specific and yet adaptable to specific situations. It's certain soil types, adaptable to different climates and different production systems. So with soil health, we really are focused on obtaining a win-win-win situation where there's a continual positive feedback loop. Applying those principles really starts to build soil aggregates, stable aggregates, and protect soil structure, adding organic carbon and increasing rooting capacity, which reduces compaction. And then that sort of feeds back to provide more plant available water and to increase infiltration, which then helps buffer against wind and water erosion. And then you start seeing less energy costs through reduced tillage and lower input because you have built up this organic nutrient bank. There's lower disease pressure, more water, more nutrient access, and supporting more biological activity and soil organism diversity. So you just keep kind of moving up this chain of positive feedback until you reach this condition where field conditions are more resilient, they're more stable, more consistent and predictable, and you have improved yields and quality, lower costs and decreased risk, and also protecting other resource concerns and reducing environmental impacts. So the Soil Health Division was formed in 2014. We have staff all across the country. There are a few based in the headquarters office. The director is Bianca Moebius-Clune, and myself, I'll be based there as well. And we have different regions that are broken up and regional specialists in all of those areas of the country that are highlighted together. And we work very closely with state staff to address local needs and regional needs and also national priorities. And we're expanding, which is very exciting. I was so happy to be brought on in January. And since then, we are expanding. We have a call out now for applications for 4 regional soil health specialists across the country. They'd be based at the National Tech Support Centers in Fort Worth, Greensboro, South Carolina, and Portland, Oregon. And they'll serve as regional points of contact for multiple states, really working as an interdisciplinary team to address regional and national priorities. This application is actually open now, and we are really hoping to have a broad, diverse, well-qualified pool of applicants. So please share this information broadly and widely. I have a couple of links down here at the bottom where the announcements are. And we are in the process of finalizing the Western and Eastern soil health team leader positions. Those closed a few weeks ago, so we'll be bringing on 2 team leaders, which is very exciting. So we'll have 6 new people joining us shortly. And we also are planning to hire a soil health specialist with a focus on socioeconomics sometime in the near future. So the Soil Health Division is working very closely with some of the climate change work. The executive order issued in January was titled Tackling the Climate Crisis at Home and Abroad, and it really outlined plans to address climate concerns and had specific deadlines and project goals for the USDA. So the USDA had an open public comment period through the Federal Register, closed at the end of April, I believe, addressing 4 areas: the climate smart agriculture and forestry, biofuels and renewable energy, catastrophic wildfire, and environmental justice. And, you know, the practices that NRCS has been based on and the programs have always promoted practices that mitigate and build resilience. And right now, there will be a lot of opportunities for soil health and soil health division to be involved in this, because soil health really addresses both the mitigation aspects and the resilience aspects, because in incorporating and increasing organic matter and promoting growth and having continual living roots and the management of residues, that's all really mitigating some of the emissions of greenhouse gases, especially CO2, and sequestering carbon in the soils. And then the resilience side, all of those aspects of improving soil health, like aggregate stability, reducing erosion, increasing habitat, increasing organic matter, those things really do build resilience in a soil and buffer, increasing infiltration, buffer from extreme weather events. So holding and storing more water in times of low precipitation, and then allowing infiltration and drainage to occur with extreme weather events. So soil health really does fit very well with goals to focus on improving and mitigating and building resilience in climate change. So we are working closely with the headquarters and with the agency priorities on climate, and we're waiting departmental guidance on the next steps, really. This is a very big agenda. USDA is developing a strategy to fulfill that executive order, and we will be working towards those goals soon once we have guidance from the department. One of the things we have been working on that does kind of overlap with climate change and carbon sequestration specifically is the interim practice standard that was released last year. It's a soil carbon amendment. It addresses biochar application, compost application, and then other kind of carbon-based residues and carbon-based amendments, really. And we are supporting states as they implement this through technology transfer and training. There are a number of states that have adopted this new interim, and the interim has a 3-year review period. So we'll be working with states on their implementation and then evaluating and looking at some data to determine the issues that need to be addressed with carbon amendment. And if after the 3-year review, this becomes a permanent conservation practice standard. So part of that training and technology support, we're offering conversations on soil health, and I'll get into a little bit more detail about where this conversations on soil health has come from. But for biochar, the biochar one is coming up in the next couple of weeks. It's on May 27th. We have a number of presenters. I think we have 5 or 6, including experts and researchers from UC Davis and Cornell. We have a couple of speakers from ARS who have been researching biochar, and a representative of the US Biochar Initiative. And we're moderating a Q&A session for staff. And these are actually publicly available too, but we'll be taking questions from the field really to help implement this. There's some variability in application in biochar characteristics and how they interact with soil characteristics. So there's some details that we'd like to help field staff give them the resources to evaluate. And this will be one of the first steps in that process. We're also writing a biochar fact sheet. It's in review right now. And there was an agreement with USDA, ARS, and the Northwest Climate Hubs to develop a Pacific Northwest biochar atlas. This also included Oregon State University and another Northwest-based agency. So kind of an inter-agency agreement here. It's a very handy tool that kind of addresses some of that variability and makes some recommendations about applications. So in NRCS, the conservation planning process is a 9-step process, and our soil health management plans fit into that flow. The first step is in soil health management planning is to really identify problems and opportunities, working closely with a land manager client, determine their objectives. What are the customer's objectives? And then inventory resources, determine if there are any resource concerns using some of the analytical tools we have, and then formulating alternatives to propose different practices and plans. And then the customer is part of the decision-making process, referring back to what the original objectives are. The second step, so the first 7 steps are grouped together under the activity, the conservation planning activity, and then the design and implementation is in step 8. And so that's taking all that information, designing what practices we put in place to affect those resource concerns and improve them. And then the final step is a soil testing to evaluate and monitor that plan. And this step, the conservation evaluation and monitoring activity, occurs towards the end, but it can also be, especially with soil health, occurring in the earlier steps, like steps 3 and 4. So we can use that to determine a baseline of soil health and the soil health indicators, and then kind of use it through the planning process. So that last part is a little bit cyclical in some ways. And this slide actually kind of summarizes that. Again, the soil health management planning activity is steps 1 through 7. The soil health design and implementation activity is the step 8. And then the soil testing can really be used in several places. Early on to evaluate and determine a baseline of the soil health. And then towards the end, of the planning process to monitor any changes, and that can be revisited as well. So soil testing is really one of the biggest keys. We have an in-field soil health assessment that does not involve laboratory analysis, but part of the impetus and the challenges that we faced, the opportunities that were presented, is the advancement in analyzing the indicators in the lab and understanding the soil microbiology. So our soil health testing activity uses labs. We have recommended methods. The core 5 soil health indicators we work with most often are soil organic carbon, active carbon analyzed with POC, and we analyze biologically available nitrogen, aggregate stability, and another indicator. Having a moment. Sorry about that. All these testing results, these indicators, are analyzed and sent to our database. We're developing right now a soil health database and dynamic soil properties data hub. So these tools will allow for the collection of all that information, including any others. We recommend also enzyme analysis, and we can do some other analysis for biological identifying diversity and activity of soil microorganisms. So all of that will be available for collection, storage, analysis, and interpretation. And working with these dynamic soil properties data hub and some of the other databases that are currently in development will be available in the future. Our conservation innovation grants also support this idea that we are pushing the edge and looking for innovative methods and innovative practices. The on-farm conservation innovation trials notice of funding opportunity was open recently, and applications close June 21st. There is $25 million set aside for on-farm trials for 2021 and $10 million specifically for soil health demo trials. Other priority areas for these on-farm trials include climate smart, irrigation, water management, and management technologies and strategies. The soil health demo trials minimum data set is an amount of data. So that includes some of those indicators we talked about, and soil descriptive inherent properties of the soil, location information, and we are building a database for that entry. So every project that participates will enter that data. It's part of a Farm Bill mandated conservation practice database. So a much bigger project that we are inserting all this soil health information. And that's one of the things that has been really interesting looking at the progression of soil health, is that there's some variability in some of the indicators that we can address and start to analyze. And part of what building up this database is going to allow us to do is to interpret regional results and to connect those practices, conservation practices, with the indicators, and then ultimately, evaluate their effectiveness. We have some other partnerships that support innovations and some technology transfer tools. So working with the Northeast Cover Crop Councils, they've developed a species selection tool funded in part by NRCS, and it's actually live right now. They are still working with the seeding rate calculator that should be ready in the summer. And we have plans to work with the councils in 4 different regions in the Northeast, West, South, and Midwest to develop a national decision support tool that kind of uses this same framework. So it will basically be 4 tools in one, with a cover crop species selection, a seeding rate calculator, and a mix maker. and an economic calculator. And then last in development will be the adaptive nitrogen management tool, which will help determine how much nitrogen credit to give different soil cover crop combinations or species. We just recently had soil health basics training that was for technical service providers. So they have been trained and are able to complete a soil health management conservation planning activity like those, the planning activities we talked about a moment ago. It was delivered by the division and held in late April, just a few weeks ago. We had 135 complete the 3-day training, and there was a lot of demand. Some people couldn't register. We had a cap on it. You know, there's some limitations to the number of people we can train virtually. So we do plan to hold it again in the future, and there's a registration kind of wait list that we're generating. We also provide these conversations on soil health that I mentioned in relationship to biochar. And this was prompted by the pandemic because everyone is teleworking. We were wanting to connect with staff from across the country. We've had, our 13th is coming up, that's the biochar one. And they're all recorded and available on YouTube. It's linked here in the presentation. And in the past, we've had a variety of themes. One focused on the plant materials centers and their work that's relevant to soil health. Another one recently was working with historically underserved producers and the different methods that state staff have used to support those producers, and also how USDA approaches monitoring and ensuring parity among historically underserved producers. We have the biochar one coming up in May, and then in June, we'll have a cover crops and nematode management themed conversation. And we really try to design these so there's a lot of interaction, and we're able to have kind of a lengthy question and answer session with all of the expert speakers. And lastly, our soil health how-to video series is another outreach tool that we have. It focuses on management plans in the West and Southwest regions, and it's a series of 25 short videos within 6 different blog posts. And they're all available on farmers.gov. And the 6th and final one was released in March, early March, and they're linked here as well. So that kind of wraps up what Soil Health Division has been up to. We do a lot, and the NRCS is working on a variety of different soil health approaches. We have a lot of programs and technical assistance and outreach available, and I'll look forward to any questions you might have.
So Rachel, we have a few questions. The first one is from Julie Winchell from the Blue Bonnet RC&D in Texas. And she just wants to know just what is biochar and what's it used for?
Okay, so biochar is biological material, usually wood or wood waste or some kind of crop residue that's harvested, like there's a rice waste biochar. It's made from a variety of materials, really. From wood to plant crop materials, even some manures can be biocharred. And the process is called pyrolysis. It's a low oxygen, low temperature kind of burning process. It's controlled. So it really produces a very stable form of carbon and organic matter. So it's very recalcitrant, it can be in the soil for, hundreds of years, helping to sequester carbon. It's one way of treating some of the waste products we have in forestry and in agriculture. And it really, the function of biochar in soils can be really variable because the qualities of biochar can also be very variable based on the materials and the process. But it definitely increases organic matter because you're adding directly there organic carbon. It can help with water regulation and infiltration rates. It's very helpful in low fertility soils. But we're actually exploring the best ways to apply and analyze biochar's effects on different types of soils. So that's the long answer of biochar.
And you had, we'll be sending out your presentation. Someone wanted to know how to join the conversations on soil health and also the biochar conversation. That was on one of the slides, wasn't it, that you had up there?
I think it's linked there. The recordings are available on the YouTube channel, and that is linked on that. I'm sorry, I'm skipping around. I hope that's okay.
Yeah, go ahead. I thought you might want to refer right there. Or what's the tool selector?
I didn't. Okay, sorry. It's actually on the conversations page is where the YouTube page is. And so I'll move more slowly. I didn't realize you all could see the slides.
So if not, you could send us, how do you get to the YouTube? What YouTube channel?
Okay, it's a live link here in the presentation. You might have the PDF, so that won't come through, but I will send you the link if that works okay.
At bottom where it says Soil Health Convo.
Oh, yes. Yeah, you can use that as well.
Okay. Okay. If you want to stop sharing your screen,
yes,
then we can open to people. If you want to open your screen or your picture or not and ask a question of Rachel. And if after that, after we have some questions, I'd like to know if councils are doing, how they're using this knowledge. I know we do in Appalachian RC&D, but I'll wait to hear from some of the others. So are there other questions from people that you'd like to know? It says, can you, she also want, Julie also wants the link to the Southwest blog. Yes,
I can do that.
Okay. And yes, there will be a copy of the presentation. We currently have a PDF because it's so big, it wouldn't come through.
Right.
So, but you can type in, you know, capture them on the PDF and put them in your browser. So we will send the PDF version out since it has lots of pretty pictures. So it's a big, great. Other questions that you might have of her?
I have a question.
Okay.
So she had a lot of links and things in there, and some of those are hard to get off of PDFs. I'm just trying to figure out a way to get those easier.
Okay. Maybe.
Or we're trying to, we may use some of this material in our 2 classes on soils and urban agriculture that are our intern grants. So it looked like a great information for them to have available to them. So I was trying to make it easier for the students to be able to access this.
Maybe Rachel, there'd be a way if we'll have your contact information that you can place it in a Dropbox or something where they can pull it down if it's too large to go through email or something.
Sure. I will definitely send the links too, so that you can access those materials that are already published. And yeah, you feel free to reach out with other requests.
And Jean, did you have a question? Can't hear you. We're hearing lots of static. Okay.
This is Julie Winchell, and I can't see how to hold my hand up.
Okay.
But I was hoping to use some of this for the soils class for the interns that we're going to have this summer as well. And so that's why the Southwest blog, being in Texas, that sounded like something that may be more directly applicable to our region. So really interested in hearing and getting the link to that, Rachel. And I was also wondering, do you have the contacts for the soils health that is in Texas, or is that one that's still open?
No, we do have a regional specialist in Texas. His name is Willie Durham, and I can share that. He's He's our regional specialist there. And I know he works closely with a variety of groups in
Is
that
he in the
area.
Fort Worth office? In our CS office?
I think he is based in Fort Worth.
Okay.
At
Yes.
probably at the technical center.
I think so.
Yeah. Okay.
We are still trying to find somebody to do the soil makers component. I've got a lot of soil people, but they're more like geologists and stuff that are going to be participating. And I could probably do it, but I'd rather have a specialist do it. So I might be contacting Willie. We have no NRCS officers at our field office right now because everybody's been promoted out of our region. So, so that happened this spring after I started putting the application together. So congratulations to everybody who got promoted, but has left me trying to scramble to figure out where everybody ended up. Okay, thank you.
And Julie, you might go to your area office above your district conservationist office, or even the state office in your state, because they may have someone near that could assist you with that.
We're a little large for that. So some of my district offices are a couple of 100 miles away.
Yeah.
So we do have a Weatherford office, and then the Fort Worth office are both within our 10 county area. But so that's why I was trying to figure out where people landed. Our specialist here ended up in Mineral Wells, and so that's a far stretch for her to try and participate with us anymore.
Okay. Amanda, did you have a question? You'll have to unmute yourself.
Sorry, I thought I had.
Okay.
I wanted to ask Rachel, so in Connecticut, we have a soil health initiative program in partnership with NRCS. We deliver education workshops. We actually have had some pilot projects on no-till equipment with area farms. One thing we're interested in, and I'm glad you brought up biochar, but it's kind of a little bit of the Wild West out here for us in learning and stuff. So are there any good examples that you would recommend pointing to where maybe an RC&D and NRCS have partnered to deliver some sort of a biochar, either educational program or a pilot?
You know, I'm not familiar with any specific agreement we have investigating biochar. That's something I can look into and get back to you on it.
I've got a little bit of information if it helps.
Please.
The Una Heacock is one of the board members, the national board members with me, and she is her RC&D is pretty well connected with a group working on biochar, and I think it's the Sonoma Institute. And they do a lot of work. They're working on some plots where they're adding biochar in with, as they put in the fertilizer or they're tilling. It's also holds moisture real well so that you can reduce the amount of water that you're adding. And it's also kind of mimics the good fires we used to have back when in the day when the things would be left because they weren't just burnt to ash in the West, when our forests were become so overstocked. So it mimics the original process really that was designed, where frequent fires left material because they didn't really burn as hot. And then that material, collects nutrients and water, like she was saying, but ranchers and farmers can also amend their soils with it. So they're out in the West, they were demonstrating these basically like a small container that had an oven in it. They burned the woody materials. They had an air curtain above it so smoke wasn't coming out, and they reburned the gases. And then out the bottom, they had a conveyor belt carrying the biochar would fall through and then would be wetted down, and so it came out as wet material, and so that you could pile that and then you distribute it out on your land to amend your soils. That's kind of what's going on with the Sonoma I think it's the Sonoma Biochar Institute. But Una Heacock, she can probably, if you want more information about those plots and that group, that'd be a great resource for biochar.
We were kind of thinking about a way to get biochar in the hands of farmers to experiment with their compost, because we have several farmers that would like to do that, but again, just the cost is very expensive. So if there's a way to help them experiment with it is what we were kind of hoping to get at.
Yeah, doing some test plots and some costs. Those are still the things I think people are working on with biochar, is how to make it for farmers and ranchers to make it feasible, as far as cost. And if they own some forested land also in the uplands, good forest, health projects, thinning, things like that, they could, there's other ways to do it besides a machine, where you could end up, you get a fire going, and as the coals drop down, then you wet them down, but that's kind of low, that's, you're not going to, low production. So there's some things being worked on, and that group's probably tuned in as much as I on the West as anybody on the progress. They're doing test plots out in California on the ag areas, where they're using it as an amendment, and then seeing about production and water yield, savings and things like that.
Thank you.
Okay. Jean, who her mic isn't working today, had a question for you, Rachel, about how can councils best use this information? Is there a soil health curriculum or tips on how to conduct farmer trainings? And I know you're only 6 months into the organization, but I can relay a few things after you answer that question if you'd like to.
Sure. I do just real quickly want to jump back to the biochar for just 1 second and mention we have a couple of folks in ARS who do some research. There's one based in Oregon whose name is Kristen Tripp. And then we have Jeff Novak, who's in Florence, South Carolina. And those two speakers will be part of our conversation, so they'll be sharing their research. And then secondly, the interim practice standard does support financial assistance for applications. And one of the scenarios is a mix of compost and biochar. So we were trying to really offer a lot of options for different applications, because not a lot of people are experimenting with 100% biochar, and a lot of people have more access to compost. So we have blends different percentages of those materials as part of the option. So maybe work with the local office on that. And then we have so many resources on soil health. Our formal training programs might not be completely accessible, but the soil health pages, really, we have a number of materials on soil biology. We have the technical notes that go into a lot of the details on the laboratory indicators. And then the in-field soil health assessment really goes into more of the qualitative assessments we can do in the field. And those are all available online as well.
Okay. Tips for farmer training.
And I found I just want to let you know, I put it over in the link. There's a direct link to the Sonoma Biochar, their organization and the work they're doing, if anybody wants that.
Thank you.
Great. Thanks.
Tips on farmer training, Rachel?
It's really interesting. I feel like COVID has shifted a lot of things in terms of outreach to farmers. We have all those materials that are available, and they're published materials. I've seen some innovative virtual-based trainings that aren't quite out there yet. I feel like the in-field field days, farmer to farmer exchanges are the most effective, but we've been limited in what we can do with that. But often the regional specialists will hold field days working with the local offices to provide trainings, and especially most recently, the focus has been on that in-field soil health assessment, because our technical note came out very recently. So they do take that out and have some in-person trainings, and we'll get back to normal sometime soon, right?
Yep.
But we have a variety of approaches, and maybe we'll be innovating on virtual trainings here soon. That's one priority to look at as we come out of COVID.
I can tell you that you can also go to NACD's website. They have a NACD Soil Health Champion Network where they have sometimes videos or most all of them are videos of farmers, ranchers of all across the nation who talk about what they did for soil health. Here in Tennessee, the Tennessee Association of Conservation Districts actually has a soil health specialist that comes and speaks to meetings in our state. And many states, other national associations of conservation districts or state conservation districts might also have one in theirs. Ours brings the soil boxes with a rainfall simulator, and we actually, on the Appalachian RC&D's YouTube channel, we can send that out, have a demonstration that we did for our beginning farmers of him demonstrating the rainfall simulator and the soil blocks, and talks about soil health. So that is also a good network to look at, is the NACD Soil Health Champions Network. And we'll send our link to the Tennessee ones and to our YouTube presentation that we did, because we filmed it when we were virtual with our experts, of him demonstrating that. And that could be used in some of your trainings, because we do that every year in our beginning farmer training, is have them come and do that demonstration, which is really a great demonstration to talk about the need for cover and, you know, why. And he does a shovel test where he goes and digs up and shows the aggregates or no aggregates and that kind of thing. Other questions that we have that says someone, Jean would also like a link to the NFL soil health assessment document.
Yes, I'll definitely include that.
Okay. And Susan, what did you just download? Is that the?
Yeah, that's that link that Jean was asking about. I just went over and looked it up while we were talking. I believe that's the link to the PDF.
Okay, all right.
Or
We've
I'll
got,
put in the link to the page anyway.
so we've got a lot of things that we're going to send you. We've got another minute. Does anybody have a burning question while we have the expert here with us?
Right. Just one more question. Now, maybe I wasn't clear in my when I put in chat, but a copy of this whole webinar is going to be available.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Maybe you answered it already. I just wanted to make sure.
Yeah, we have the PDF, and Rachel's going to figure out how you can get to the actual presentation, so you might use it in your trainings, the PowerPoint.
Thank you.
All right.
And I was just going to say that it'll probably take us a couple days. It usually does to get the webinar posted on our YouTube channel, or on the National Association of RC&D, their YouTube channel, but we get that posted and send out a link to that to everybody that has registered for this webinar and any other additional information. So look for that to come your way.
So that's the recording of this session, Susan, that you're talking about?
Yeah, I'll send a link out for the recording of the session, and then like any other, we'll send the PDF out. Go ahead and attach that with the email that I send out as a follow-up, and then any other information, Rachel, that you want us to share as well. We can just push all that out at one time.
Okay, did you have a post survey that you wanted people to take, Susan? If you want to put that up, I'll talk about our next session will be July the 8th, and it will be about working with minority farmers. And we will have several great speakers for that. So that will be July 8th, again at 2 o'clock Eastern Standard Time. You'll get an invite to that. And we appreciate you all being part of that. If you will just complete the post survey and submit it, then that would be great. Any final comments, Susan?
I just want to thank Rachel for being here. This was very informative. I really enjoyed the presentation, so much information. And thanks for everybody that attended. And thank you, Dana, as always.